Empress Augusta Bay, dawn, November 1st, 1943. Our amphibious forces land. The beachhead established, the transports retire. From the northwest, a Japanese force is heading into attack. In the early morning hours of November 2nd, Task Force 39 met them and routed them. Since the conquest of Guadalcanal, culminating in the surface engagement of the 14th and 15th of November 1942, so disastrous to the Japanese fleet, our forces have advanced steadily in their drive to oust the enemy from the Solomon Islands. June 1943, Rendova was occupied and initial beachheads established on New Georgia. July, the bombardment of Munda Point was conducted to assist the advance of our ground forces, who captured Munda Airfield on the 6th of August. August 16th, troops landed on Vela La Vela, and by the 9th of October, Jap resistance on that island had ceased. When enemy positions on Kolam Bangara and Vela La Vela became untenable, as a result of our control over surrounding islands, the Japs resorted to the use of small craft to effect an evacuation. Several attempts to use warships for this purpose were frustrated by our surface forces with severe losses to the enemy. We were now faced with the task of eliminating Bougainville as the last obstacle to complete the domination of the Solomons. Dog Day for the Marine landing at Empress Augusta Bay was set for dawn of November 1st. In preparation for the landing, the plan called for a surface bombardment of Buka and Bunis airfields by Task Force 39 shortly after midnight. Followed by a daylight shelling of the Shortland area at 0600 on Dog Day. After the completion of the Shortlands bombardment, one destroyer division was to break off from the task force to fuel from an oil barge in Hawthorne Sound. According to plan, at 7:30 in the morning on Dog Day, Task Force 39 was retiring. Destroyer Division 45 was released to fuel at Hawthorne Sound. Shortly thereafter, plans were changed somewhat upon receipt of reports from Commersols that search planes had made a sight contact and were tracking 4 enemy cruisers and 6 destroyers heading north toward St. George's Channel at 25 knots. Anticipating a reversal in course on the part of these enemy ships, ComSouPac ordered the force commander back to Empress Augusta Bay to cover the landing forces. Task Force 39 arrived at 14:15. Amphibious forces of about 15,000 men from 3 divisions of large transports were staging their initial landing in the Empress Augusta Bay area. Threatened air attacks delayed the unloading and departure of the transport. At 1800, the transports headed southward, covered by Task Force 39. In the meantime, Destroyer Division 45 had completed fueling and was on the way to rejoin. Some of the transports did not complete unloading, so had orders to detach from the retiring transport group at 2300 and return to Empress Augusta Bay. Fortunately, Division 45 arrived as the partially unloaded transports were detaching and fell into formation with Task Force 39. The presence of the enemy surface force previously reported near St. George's Channel made it expedient for Task Force 39 to precede the returning transports to provide cover for them and for a group of mine layers still operating off Cape Mulcahy. At this time, it was definitely established that a Jap force was headed toward Empress Augusta Bay. Successive reports from reconnaissance planes spotted their positions, course, and speed, so that CTF-39 was able to determine a minimum speed for an interception at a point west of Empress Augusta Bay. It is possible that the following assumptions were made by the enemy. That only one cruiser task force was in the South Pacific. That this force had bombarded Buka at midnight and the Shortlands at dawn on the 1st of November. Then covered unloading operations of transports at Empress Augusta Bay, leaving with the transports at dusk on the 1st. That accordingly, our cruiser task force was retiring for fuel, ammunition, and rest. The enemy probably believed the night of November 1st was an ideal time to clean up our newly arrived landing force. The task force commander's general plan of battle was to maintain the cruisers across the entrance of Empress Augusta Bay to prevent entry of enemy units. Gradually to push the enemy westward to gain sea room for maneuvering. And so in case of cripples, they could retire on a disengaged side. The cruisers will fight the action at distances close to maximum range of enemy torpedoes. Recent actions in this area had brought to light the existence of an enemy torpedo with phenomenal range and a large explosive charge. It is thought also that enemy cruisers are equipped to carry such torpedoes. Even after considering the fact that 8-inch gunships were in the enemy line and that our 6-inch would not penetrate his armor at long ranges, it was elected to match 6 against 8 rather than close to effective torpedo ranges during early stages of the battle. In favor of long-range action was our radar fire control versus the enemy's optical, which necessitates illumination. In this particular instance, it was considered more important to defeat the enemy decisively than to annihilate him at the risk of having several of the cruisers out of action before the completion of the landing operation. To exploit the element of surprise by sending in the destroyers first to attack with torpedoes. Follow destroyer doctrine where possible. Attack on opposite bows of a single column. In instances of 2 or more enemy columns, destroyer groups attack different columns. And on launching torpedoes, retire in opposite directions. Turn to parallel the objective before opening fire. And hold fire until cruisers open up, unless under gunfire. Cruisers are required to hold fire until torpedoes can arrive at target. Unless the enemy opens fire first, or evidences having sighted us. Doctrine should be simple, plainly announced and understood by commanders, as was apparent in this action. As Task Force 39 approached Empress Augusta Bay, low, dark clouds hung over the formation, and it was raining steadily. At 0100, general quarters were sounded. Plane reported contact with an enemy force of 8 to 12 ships, bearing approximately 325, distance 85 miles, course 125, estimated speed 25 knots. 0114, friendly planes to port. We increased speed to 28 knots. Distant flare reported on starboard bow, probably a snooper over our mine layers. Flare 2 points on starboard bow, about 30,000 yards. Ships contacted, bearing 016 at 20,000 yards. Identified on TBS as the Renshaw and mine layer group retiring southward. Unidentified plane over mine layers. Renshaw reports she is bringing a snooper with her. At bearing 328, distance 28,000 yards, is a rain squall. There is also something just beyond, which may be the Nips. At 0227, there's a definite contact bearing 308, distance 38,000 yards. Contact is verified and designated enemy. The task force commander has the ball. From now on, the course of action will result in the success or failure of the engagement. According to battle plan, destroyer attack units were to go in upon getting contact and approximate torpedo solution. Osborne has the contact. 45th Division heading in. There now appear to be several ships in enemy group. Estimated course 150, speed 29. Desdiv 46 ordered to countermarch to 180. Foote misunderstood and turned at once, ahead of the other three destroyers. Cruisers execute turn 18. A second enemy group is contacted at 278. Then a third group at 272. Each of the three groups seems to be composed of 4 ships. The northern group appears to have changed course to the right, then shortly later back to the southeast again. It is quite possible that the enemy is zigzagging. Desdiv 46 has now made contact and requests permission to be released for attack. This request was difficult for CTF to approve, well knowing that his forces would be divided and not knowing what future developments would take place. Nevertheless, Desdiv 46 was ordered to attack enemy rear group. The destroyers turned by column movement to course 270 and increased speed to 34 knots. Foote continues southward, separated from her unit. Cruisers are waiting word from Division 45 that torpedoes are on their way. From a distance 5,600 yards on the port bow of a northern enemy group, Desdiv 45 fires a half salvo of torpedoes and executes turn 9 to retire on course 050. Claxton comes on in and fires a second half salvo at what she believes to be a cruiser and turns to a position astern of Stanley. To quote from the report of Desdiv 45, "We lived years waiting for the torpedoes to explode. It was probably only half a minute after firing that the squadron commander and the flag captain started to commiserate with each other as to how we could have possibly missed. We regretted driving into such close range where the enemy might have sighted us as we fired." About 1 minute after our fish were launched, reports were received that our targets showed faint flashes, which observers thought were torpedo tubes firing. The enemy exploits its torpedo menace at the first opportunity. The enemy did not open with gunfire, nor did any of their torpedoes hit, although there were several reports of torpedoes passing close on parallel courses. So Division 45 stood on its retirement heading of 050 until it had opened to 10,000 yards, instead of turning to a firing course at 8,000 as originally intended. It was estimated that 6 minutes would be required for our torpedoes to reach the target. However, after 3.5 minutes, CIC reported that the enemy group had turned to starboard, indicating our torpedo attack had been detected. So the cruisers were ordered to open fire. It was a great relief to Desdiv